Hello, my loves. Welcome to Be for Vibrant. My name is Kellyanne, and I am speaking directly to all of the recovering perfectionists today for this March card reading. I am so elated to get into this one because I've already pulled some cards, not all of them, but already pulled a few cards, and some of my favorite goddesses have shown up. So if you watched February's reading, we talked about some of the archetypes, as in identities that we wear, that have been a part of the perfectionist story, a part of the perfectionist way of you know, trying to define oneself and also trying to evolve past the kind of control tendencies that we tend to have as tight-necked, tight-shouldered perfectionists. So if you didn't get to go and be a part of that reading, that's totally okay. This is a separate one. And I'm sure that there are messages in there that would help, so I highly recommend it. But today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be um, talking with the goddesses today, and the goddesses also have a little bit of their own sort of archetypal identities because there are 12 goddesses in the Oracle of the Goddess deck, which I'm using today, and they correspond with the out whoa, the signs in astrology. This is how you know that my perfectionism recovery is working because normally I would have just stopped the recording and been like, it's early enough in the recording that I could just start over. Because if you know anything about me, I would rather record a video in one take than have to edit afterward. That's my worst nightmare. Especially when I am teamless and it's just me right now. So, until I have somebody else to do my editing for me, you're gonna see one take and you're gonna see mistakes. That's my motto. So, the perfectionism recovery is in progress. But yeah, the goddesses align with the 12 signs of the astrological wheel. So even just the first one that I saw, Erzuli, who is the goddess of sensitivity, is the goddess of Pisces, is the goddess that's related to Pisces. And you can tell because she's got fish around her and she's just sad. She's got sad girl energy. Like that's so Pisces. Mwah. I just love that my Pisces girl popped up right at the beginning of this reading. So what we're going to be looking into today are the head, heart, and home cards for these goddesses. It's divided up that way so that you can get a sense for the mental systems and structures, the emotional and like big feeling spaces and capacity, as well as the environmental and relational changes that all need to be made or that are already in progress uh, on the recovery stage. So, as we take a look at our perfectionism recovery, where we're at, where we're going, we're going to be listening to these goddesses. And, if in case you hadn't noticed, there's a big block of text on here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the fruit and we're going to spit out the seeds. Yeah, we're just going to take exactly what resonates with you and spit out the rest. So as we go, I highly recommend as you're listening to just go into the comments for this video, like pull up the comments section and just use it as like a live journal of like words and phrases that you're hearing the goddesses say that resonate most with you. Because the things that I pull out and the things that I say are like resonating for me that I feel like are wanting to be channeled in this message, in this reading, might not always line up with what you think you need. And that's okay. But I still want to hear what you have going on anyway. So I would love to hear in the comments exactly what you've got going on. I pulled two cards for the headspace already, but I'm going to be pulling cards for the heart space and the home space in just a bit. So you're going to get to see us. We're going to get to do it together and pull those cards for our emotional energy as well as for our environmental energy. So first off, for our minds, for our head, we have Erzuli telling us to think charitably, which we really need as perfectionists, okay? As well as Pasui, goddess of endurance, who says, think unbiasedly. Excuse me. Think unbiasedly. So I'm going to go with Erzuli first. The Pasui is far and away my number two girl. So I'm just excited that they're here today with us. And you know what? I'm actually feeling a little warm in here, so just give me a second while while I go and I turn my AC back on instead of the fan. Let's see. Okay. All right. Let's see what Arizali has to say. I hope you took that as an opportunity to like grab some water, grab a drink, do whatever is going to help you settle in for this reading. Ooh, I'm drinking the cosmos. All right. Arizali is saying, we are all here to help each other make the most of life. Those in obvious need deserve sympathy, guidance, and help. Give aid and comfort to those in need. But first, examine the motives of all involved, including yourself. Focusing on the needs of others can be an escape from loneliness or your own needs. Idealizing another can result from deception or lack of self-worth. As a perfectionist, we might idolize certain other people who maybe even intimidate us because they seem to like have it all together. In reality, their perfect lives are anything but. And for us to, you know, try to deal with some semblance of like um discerning the difference between, the idealized worthiness of somebody else and our own worthiness because we're not there and we don't have the things that they have. There's a need for us to challenge those thoughts so that we don't always think that somebody else's grass is greener, or so we don't put other people up on the perfectionistic pedestals that we've put ourselves on for many years. Part of the recovery process is also, focusing on the needs of others in such a way that we are losing ourselves to a good thing, losing ourselves to service, losing ourselves in the sort of rhythm of uh, enhancing somebody else's life. It can be a way to get away from our own perfectionistic tendencies, to get out of our own head, to get out of our own way, and to feel a little bit less tight and wound up and rigid about some of the things that we feel like aren't really going our way. And that we want to see happen or we want to see gain momentum, but the help that we give to others can sometimes serve as like a way, kind of when you're taking a shower or you're doing the dishes, a way in the background of your mind to just set that boiling pot in the back on simmer and let it like let the spices become aromatic and give it time to develop the flavors that it needs to. Give our ideas time to develop instead of trying to make them right away. Give our relationship conflicts time to simmer so that we can find alternative pathways to showing up aggressively or urgently when sometimes things like need a little space or need a little bit of coaxing. That is all to say, we need to be able to give some love and service to others in order to service ourselves. As selfish as that may sound, when you do it from a place where you really are focusing on that other person, it is not selfish at all. It is not even just, there's like a very white supremacy orientation to charity where, we do it because it's rewarding. We do it because the way that we're helping other people makes us feel good about ourselves. But this is a different kind of charity, the kind of charity where we're doing something for other people because it reminds us of our own humanity. So it doesn't just make us feel warm and fuzzy, it reminds us of our own reality. And so we endeavor to serve from a place of our own grounded gratitude. And that grounded gratitude is what Arizali wants us to be sensitive to, and what Arizali wants us to um to you know uh, see as our own form of comfort. I think it's also too, if you're a recovering perfectionist, then you might also be a recovering people pleaser. I feel like the crossover there is a Venn diagram that looks almost like a circle. The the overlap is almost complete for a lot of people, I think. So I think the caveat here is not to go helping people more or trying to give advice because you're just trying to help, but actually asking people questions, being curious about them, and seeing if they need any guidance at all, or if there's a way that you can, um, give of yourself without getting getting yourself caught up in those people-pleasing tendencies of like s overstepping, overstepping the giving, overstepping the service that you're doing to others. Because I've done that where I've been like, I want you to have a good thing and the best of this good thing because I can see that you need help. But instead of asking you the help that you need, I'm just going to take the lead and I'm going to take control. And both perfectionism and people pleasing are versions of that control chain that keeps us really locked in to our own tendency to manipulate the outcome so that other people feel good around us, so that we feel good about ourselves, and so that we can call some situation a success. But success, when it's been so over engineered, it's kind of superficial at that point. And we need to be able to find alternative mental frameworks for where help and service to others fits in to who we want to be and how we want to show up in the world. We also have Pasui, goddess of endurance, saying, think unbiasedly. Look beyond appearances to see things as they really are. Do not accept as fact cultural egotism and prejudices. Many accepted attitudes about the roles of men and women today are distorted. Female and male must be equal. The effects of false ideas are numerous and insidious. Root them out in yourself. Point them out in the thinking of others. This is another version of perfectionism that I really that I really go toe to toe with on a regular basis, which is the way that patriarchy and white supremacy and colonialism has turned us into people who see each other as like very specific kinds of commodities, like seeing a black man on the street versus like a white woman on the street. I have very different reactions toward them because of the commodification of those identities. Blackness has its own identity that is sold to a certain audience or sold for a certain reason, like sold, as a certain kind of product. White femininity is a product that has literally turned, female bodies with the heads cut off into beer bottles and beer advertisements on billboards. I'm not making this up. This is a literal thing that I saw. And there's like a certain kind of perfectionism that lives in that like total control again over the narrative of what certain people are capable of, who certain people should be, who they should look up to, what they should, there's a lot of shoulds. And if we're shoulding ourselves, then it's gonna get messy. If you're shoulding yourself a lot, then you're gonna have to clean up after. And the the thing that I think Passui wants us to really navigate at this juncture in the perfectionism recovery is being able to separate what is cultural ego from our own identities. We need to be able to hold on to those identities as perfectionists in recovery as well, because it's often our identification with being a perfectionist that has gotten us into trouble and has you know made us venture into places where we're kind of humiliating and embarrassing ourselves over how far over the line we'll go to prove that we know something, to prove that we can do something, to prove. It gets us into a really tight spot to live in the perfectionist identity. So we have to find others. And again, with the February perfectionism recovery reading, there were some identities that were named in there too that it would be helpful to go and take a look at. But really forming your own sense of identity is what's important here. Forming your own identities separate from what the culture says that you should care about, in addition to questioning the culture itself. Because we can't do this work in isolation. We can't just assume that we're the problem all the time. That's not only is that ego right there, I'm the problem, me, but also it's unfair to us and it's not healing. Because what it does is it keeps us trapped in the cycle that got us there. It's the isolationism and the individualism, that rugged individualism, bootstrapping that got us here in the first place, making us feel like we had something to prove. And for us to be able to break out of that mold, we have to question the cultural identities, the cultural divisions that have been created to divide us from ourselves and divide us from the me we that exists uh, within and between each other. You know, if you are a believer in oneness and you're a believer in the unification of all people because we're a lot and all beings and all everything that is living on this earth. If you are a believer in that, like, I am because we are, then the me we will resonate with you. Me we is a term that I came up with some friends of mine that really was a really speaks to how we weren't alone in the things that felt lonely for us. And we were able to find sanctuary in the me-we, in the understanding that, like, oh, just because I'm going through this right now, doesn't mean that nobody else has gone through this or nobody else is going through this. And when I connect with the we, when I connect with other people about this, then I'm able to find that endurance. I'm able to find the line between, like, where I have been biased toward myself and others, but also how I can be more positively biased. Because to be alive is to be biased. To be alive with a brain in our skulls is to have bias. You cannot live without bias. You are going to see the world from a certain specific perspective based on all the things that have happened to you in your past and all of the identities that you wear that give you certain responsibilities for how you must show up now into the future. We have bias and we can't help it. We're always going to have bias. There is never going to be a time when we don't have bias. We're always going to have it. But wouldn't it be great to be more positively biased, to be more aligned with the bias that helps us to shape our world and shape our identities in ways that are cultural and interpersonal, but also, like, it enlivening and vibrant for our own inner worlds. That inner world, outer world, mirroring. For that to happen in such a way that we're seeing the change that we want to see, and folks start to accept that we could have a female president, and and that matriarchy is a proven system for governance that is actually very healthful and and uh, equitable, then we're going to have to make those changes to our own bias, and we're going to have those conversations with other people to help them see that bias as well, and to help them see that version of reality when the perfectionist recovery process is all about changing our perspective and changing our bias away from perfection being getting everything right all the time the first time to everything happened as it was meant to happen because I needed to learn certain lessons at this time that I didn't even know were lessons I needed to learn. I couldn't have known. I don't know everything. And for me to have seen this outcome happen in this certain specific particular way, that is perfection. Because I couldn't have dreamed it up by myself. I got to co-create with the universe, and the universe moved through me to make something better than I could have even imagined, but also worse in some ways than I had hoped for. And that means that, I get to see myself in a different light, and I get to see where I'm at from a different perspective, from a different angle. And that angle is what's going to help shift the bias, help shift the perfectionism recovery from just like a lonely sort of like solo reprogramming into that me we cultural revolution. You want to get into feelings? Let's get into feelings. Don't run away. Don't run away just because we're doing feelings now, my perfectionists in recovery. Okay. Let's recover and let's find our emotional capacity here. Okay. What do perfectionists in recovery, we're watching this right now, need to hear in the month of March about that journey? Thank you. Artemis, goddess of discernment, from her heart saying, feel capable. Believe in your ability to handle anything you may encounter. Emotions must be analyzed to prevent misguided reactions to unfounded fears. I'm going to have to repeat that one again. The unknown is always with us and must be embraced if we would live a full life. Anxiety builds when we are desperate to know the outcome of plans and actions before they have reached fruition. So I'm going to read that other part again. Emotions must be analyzed to prevent misguided actions to unfounded fears. As perfectionists and, with that people-pleasing overlap, we have come to be really great storytellers, really great pattern recognizers, really great predictors of success and the outcome of a situation. And maybe for the situation that other people are going through, it's easier because we don't have that like personal investment. So we don't always we tend to get it a little bit more right than when we predict for ourselves or we think we're seeing a pattern for ourselves, around ourselves, against ourselves, next to ourselves, between those selves that we're trying to like pull back together in order to form this full human that we've lost in the process of trying to define ourselves by perfectionism. And for us to be able to separate ourselves from the, the stories and the patterns, we have to like zoom out a little bit and start to recognize that sometimes we're reacting to stories that are founded on nothing more than our greatest fear for what might happen. It hasn't happened. We are anxious about it because we want to know what's going to happen, but it hasn't happened. We're telling ourselves a story, and it just goes so deep that we are reacting. We're reacting without even considering that we might need more information, or we might need to, embrace that not all of the information is available to us. Artemis is saying the unknown is always with us and must be embraced if we would live a full life. I think if you're a perfectionist in recovery, you're aware that your recovery is what is necessary for you to live a full life. Because as a perfectionist, if you cannot, a perfectionist cannot embrace the unknown. There's just no room for it. We just don't feel capable of carrying around that trust and that faith that whatever is unknown about a situation or whatever outcome we can't control. Oh, we just get just so crazy. We just get so crazy intense and intense around other people, making other people crazy and also making other people feel like they need to be anxious for us, or they need to be anxious about how we feel about their imperfections. The perfectionism becomes a mode of control when we cannot embrace the unknown. And instead, we choose to embrace the emotional ties that we have to these stories that arise and that sort of like start to grow like fungi in the unknown. Instead of letting the unknown be this void and be this empty space where anything could happen, we start to fill that space with stories. We start to fill that space with what we think we're capable of or what we think other people are capable of. I have a problem with this is very personal to me. I have a problem with responding to other people based on the potential that I see in them. And I think loving people and appreciating people for their potential is a beautiful, compassionate thing because you're just seeing how the suffering that they've gone through has stifled or in some way like burdened their ability to show up fully and completely in ways that you think they're capable of. The problem with that, though, is you're responding to a version of that person that either isn't real, because that's not who they are right now, it's their potential, but or you're making up stories about what you think they should be capable of. And sometimes that means that we don't communicate some expectations that arise from you meeting them with that potential you have in your mind. You're meeting other people as though they are the person in your head. And just imagine that's what other people are doing too. Other people are meeting you on the level with the version of you that they've concocted in their head. Why can't they just? Why wouldn't they just? I wish they would just. Shouldn't they just? Should. There's the shoulds. And when we should ourselves, it becomes a mess. There's a big mess to clean up. But our ability to discern is something that we don't always have the emotional capacity for. And what Artemis wants us to take away from this reading is that our recovery as perfectionists who are trying not to be, or who are trying to redefine what perfection means to us, we need to develop a discernment that happens and that takes place even when we're at the peak of our emotions. We need to start noticing, like, when I'm getting overly emotional about something that hasn't even happened or might not happen, or, you know, we're we're not, we haven't even started planning the thing yet. And already in my mind, there's an outcome. Already in my mind, something is, taking place. When we're reacting to that, and that's where our emotions are being heightened, we need to use our discernment in those moments as we come down to, you know, give us the pivot, give us that, hey, maybe I need to stop thinking about it this way. Maybe I need to start asking more questions. Maybe I need to not fill the void of information with my own storytelling. Because our imagination, like Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Our imagination is a really powerful thing because it produces things that didn't exist before. And that's where we get all these inventions from. I mean, that's where we get the light bulb from and the telephone from. But we also, when we're using our imagination to supplement knowledge that is out there that we could just receive and acquire by virtue of asking, instead of going off the deep end and and just reacting, then it's a storytelling that shoots us in the foot and makes us feel a little bit crazy. And as recovering perfectionists, we already feel crazy on the level of like, the colonialist, white supremacist, capitalist culture telling us how things need to be. That shit is already making enough. That shit, the patriarchal uh culture in which it tells men how to be and women how to be and everybody in between and outside of these genders how to be. It makes us crazy. The capitalizing nature of colonialism has made us feel like we have to be a certain, a certain, have a certain quickness, have a certain urgency about things, have a certain, um, um, almost like succubus nature where we're just vampiric. We're just trying to get as much as we can from a situation as quickly as possible. And that is results in perfectionism. That results in our own perfectionistic response to people and situations and projects that we're working on. We move with urgency and we move with that vampiric, I need to get something from this as quickly as I need to extract. I need to extract as urgently as possible is what colonialism teaches us. Colonialism and the capitalist society that we've built around colonization has taught us is about extraction and transaction and urgency, getting there before anybody else does. There's this, and that's already crazy making enough. That's already crazy making enough. We don't need to add on all of these biased stories that Passui is trying to warn us about. We don't need all of that. So let's tune into our home cards here so that these goddesses can help us understand what kind of environment, relationally or physically, materially in our home space, that we need to cultivate in order to really help this recovery and help us move through all the things that we've just talked about in this reading so far. What do y'all have to say to our perfectionists in recovery? Hmm. We've got Freya, goddess of leadership, saying, lead the way. Respond with leadership to the challenge at hand. Direct all creative abilities towards your goal. Organization, coordination, and planning are vital now. Be consistent and dependable. Avoid appearing domineering. Smile. Explain your goals, actions, and decisions whenever possible. Your good example will accomplish more than any sermon. I think it was just uh yeah, it was in the previous reading in the people-pleasing recovery reading that I talked about how there are some people who just don't get it and won't get it until they see the results, until they see the end. And maybe even then they might still pathologize it as bless me, but might pathologize it as something else, as having been a result of some other action or some other force other than you and the hard work that you have put in. And it's like we're saying the same thing here. Your good example will accomplish more than any sermon. as perfectionists, we want other people to understand the vision that we have, want other people to understand the plan. We come up with the plan. I think this is a hard one for perfectionists to hear, is to um be consistent and dependable. Organization, coordination, and planning are vital now, not because we can't do it or don't want to do it, but because organization, coordination, and planning, as well as the endeavor to be consistent and dependable, has made us so rigid and uptight and inflexible that it 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 is like the coding of a perfectionist that we're trying to get away from, that we've become aware is hindering us and making us even more crazy. Hello, more crazy making for the perfectionists in recovery. It's kind of a theme in this reading, that there are so many elements of things that could go wrong even when you coordinate and even when you plan and even when you think that you have the same vision for something. I'm recording this on top of a desk that my dad and I, built together, but that he mostly cut the wood and had the supplies for and everything. But it was my vision that I conveyed and that I coordinated with him, and still we didn't have the same idea. So we had a plan, but the results were off or were different because the way that we went about doing it was not what I had in mind. And instead of doing what I might have done in the past, which is like get frustrated that somebody didn't understand, or that or make up the story that, the other person wasn't listening, or the other person wasn't, trying to see my way of doing things. I said, you know what? There's there are going to be gaps. And I can smile. I can avoid the domineering aspect of you didn't get it right and now you fired, and now I'll just do it all myself. Kind of like a perfectionist in a group project. If you can't do it right, I guess I'll just do it all by myself. I took that mental step back, and in my relationship with my dad, considered that he's trying his best and that he has his own ideas of, what the best or the right way to do things is. And took it from there, in the sense that, I explained the goals right here. What Freya is saying, explain your goals, actions, and decisions whenever possible. And once it became uh, clear that that's what was needed, that's what I did. It's the the thing that I think leadership means to most people is having a plan and executing it and getting other people on board with the plan, and getting them to execute it to the level that you are satisfied. But the way that leadership works is through relationships. And in relationships, we have our own ideas, even when we talk about it, even when we communicate what the best thing is, or what the best version is, or the ideal outcome for a project, or for a relationship, or for a date is. Even when we have all these, things that we take into consideration, there is still that sense of unknown that comes with the gap between what you think you're agreeing on and what you're actually both seeing in your minds. That gap can be terrifying for perfectionists, and so anxiety inducing and crazy making, because all we really want is to see things done really well. And for the things that we care about, because that's where so much of perfectionism comes from, is caring about how things are done. caring enough to want to drive toward excellence. And for us to be able to relax, unclench our butts and let other people be a part of it, we do have to like redirect our energy away from what's going wrong and toward what this relationship has built so that we know how much we are capable of. And once you start to like look at all of your relationships that way of like, well, what have we built and what are we capable of? Then you're going to see that in some relationships, you are expecting way too much. You're expecting everybody to show up like you or everybody to show up like that one friend who you can always depend and rely on, who always understands your plan the first time you convey it. And then also, not only are you treating everybody, with those high expectations, but also you put such high expectations on maybe just that one person. It could be your partner, it could be your best friend, it could be a coworker that you're always in sync with, that eventually you're going to have to know, you're going to have to be aware that there is going to be misunderstanding somewhere. You're going to have conflict at some point. You will never have a relationship in your life in which there is no confrontation. Never. You will always have confrontation and conflict in your life. And that means that you putting too much expectation on people who cannot hold that and that you aren't even sure about what they're capable of, but also putting such high expectations on people who have delivered and performed over and over again, so much so that you disregard the humanity of that being a person too, and that not just, being another like clone of you, but being their own person with their own worries and concerns and, family to care for and, personal issues that they're dealing with on a regular basis. There is going to inevitably be a time where that pedestal gets a huge crack in it and they fall from your grace because you put them up so high that by the time there was a real conflict or real confrontation, you managed to treat them like they should have done better and they done fucked up by not meeting your expectation just once. It's a really tough place to be. I'm again speaking from experience. I've done this to my sister where I've put her up on a pedestal. And I've had this done to me where I've been put up on a pedestal. And the first time that I set a boundary with somebody and told them, like, this thing is annoying me in our relationship and our friendship, I was shunned and cut off and um, treated as though I never deserved a place in that person's life in the first place. And that level of perfectionism is very isolating because you'll find that you go from place to place, from person to person, looking for looking for the one person who's never going to let you down. And for years, you can be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't let you down. And then suddenly, when they do, your world collapses. And that collapse is less evidence of, you know, your perfectionist tendencies having gotten the better of you, and more evidence of how the carceral nature, and by carceral, I do mean related to incarceration as in prison and the prison industrial complex. Um, you'll realize it's the carceral nature of how we treat many of our relationships in this white colonized world. The prison that we put each other in when we put each other on pedestals is debilitating. It's a tight space. There's not a lot of room to move around, and there's not a lot of space to make mistakes. So it's not just perfectionism. It's not just this sort of conditioning that you are recovering from. It's also the nature of friendship in a, monogamy oriented, highly carceral, uh, um, world, culture. We have a tendency to see our friendships and our relationships as if they're not the one, then they don't mean that much to me, or that, they're disposable. So we're like renting intimacy until one person comes along and is everything. Hmm. Gotcha. Okay. Big, big energy. Big energy for that one person who comes along and suddenly receives every expectation from you, but also big disappointment and big grief that you experience over and over again because the people around you don't live up to your 1001 expectations. The culture that we're living in idealizes the versions of relationship that police each other and that cut each other off or shut each other out when something goes wrong. Because the reality of having become a perfectionist, having been conditioned into perfectionism in this culture, the reality is that the culture is to blame, but we are responsible for what happens to our relationships. We're responsible for what happens when we decide that this isn't working for me anymore because I cannot live a full life this way. The coding of relationships in this culture I'm like going so off of this, but I just feel like this is something that needs to be said. The code, the sort of like through line, that thread that you can pull, and it's in every relationship in, in colonized cultures, which is primarily white cultures or white adapted cultures. The through line that you can see is that we're all relying on each other to be something that they're not, and greatly disappointed and ready to just give up and throw in the towel when, the first sign of conflict happens, which are governing systems which are rooted in white supremacy and colonization love, because they would love for us to keep cutting each other off and stay isolated and stay to our own corners. They love it when we do that. Our government, the United States government specifically, loves when we do that because then we can't come together and face our differences and have conversations and communicate. Instead, we respond in that colonialist way. We go to war. We go to war and we kill, and we are out for blood. And that is the way that we resolve conflict. But in a patriarchy, war is the thing that leads to capitalism being able to thrive because our culture and our economy sustains on war and on slavery. So either we're enslaving and surveilling our friends in this expectation that we have of them, or we're going to war against them because they're not serving us in the way that we think they should. And the economy in relationships becomes less about intimacy, vulnerability, trust, and more about transactions, more about what can you do for me and what expectations can you meet? What are your KPIs? What are the key performance indicators in our relationship here that you need to meet in order to continue to have the job of being my friend? That's that's kind of how it happens. That's the way that we end up showing up because it's not just that you have become a perfectionist by conditioning, by our culture, but because our culture is rooting for it, is rooting for and is conditioning us all the time through every form of media to act this way toward our friends, to act in a surveillance way, act in an enslaving way, act in a embattling, in conflict way. And I want to make sure that I lay that all out. And I just felt so compelled to like include that in this portion of the reading because whenever the topic of leadership comes up, I always think about the relational authority that we need to embody in order to relate as opposed to transact. We need to have authority over the way that we see our relationships and the way that we behave in our relationships, or else the true authority that we look up to is our governing system. And our governing system is white supremacist, colonialist, patriarchal, capitalist. All these icky things that that make us hurt each other and make us think it's okay and actually preferable to hurt each other and or ghost each other rather than repair and heal and resolve and communicate with our words, which we are mature enough and emotionally available enough to do. I want to make sure that you know that it's not all on you, though. While you are doing this work in recovery, you are going to continue to be bombarded by all of these messages about what perfectionism is and what a perfect relationship looks like and a perfect friendship looks like. But it's not the truth. It's a version of reality that's been created to control us. And for you to release control as a perfectionist in recovery is the height of the height of revolution against these systems that need for patterns of control and power to be things that we wield against each other. It's it's hard to direct our energies toward a goal collectively and togetherly in relationship with each other, which is what the home energies is about. I feel it less, in the people pleasing reading that I just did, in that recovery reading, there's some a little bit of like furniture moving and like physical material surroundings, but this one for me is like relational cultural surroundings. And I think that really needed to be addressed today, this month, in the month of March, that there's a cultural surrounding that we need to be aware of, and we need to not make ourselves so available to in order to return to ourselves and to return to the version of ourselves that, doesn't need things to be perfect and doesn't need things to, you know, come out clean from the wash the first time. Sometimes it needs a second or a third rinse. And and that's the version of ourselves, the one who accepts that some things need a second or a third rinse. The version of ourselves who accept that can recreate the culture within and between our relationships so that it has a ripple effect and it starts to bring us together again. And it starts to, the way that we affect each other affects how the people we affect other people. That ripple, 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 ripple that just extends from our own intentional use of that maturity and emotional capacity for having these hard conversations in order so that we don't continue to repeat the patterns of colonialism that are surrounding us all the time. Ah, big messages today. If you made it this far, please put a comment. I want to see who's making it through these videos, and I don't really get to hear from y'all in the comments that much. I know there are a few of you who are watching, and I can't wait for more to show up and to be available for these messages because all everything that I just said, not easy to take in. So if you're here, I want to celebrate you that you did the hard thing. So just say a hi or a hello in the comments and let me know that you made it through all of the hard things to hear. Because I'm so proud of you. And I can't wait to celebrate you in the comments and get to know you more and get to recover together. Collective compassion is what I'm all about. And I think that's what we need to recover fully from perfectionism. I love you so much. You're deserving of all the love you desire. I hope that you share this video with any other recovering perfectionists in your life. And I hope you and they have a beautiful, wonderful rest of your day.